Welcome to the first episode of Black Ford Garage. My name is Perry and this is my garage. Our story starts in 1984, the year that Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was the top grossing movie. I got Michael Jackson's Thriller cassette for Christmas, and my dad bought a Mercury Capri RS 5.0. Now, 1984 was the year that Ford really had an answer to Chevy in terms of the pony car wars. Before that time, most of the HO motors or 5-liter Mustangs and Capris were pretty anemic and didn't make a lot of power. But the first real performance engine came out in 84 with the 4-valve or 4V, 4 Venturi carburetor, dual snorker air cleaner, performance suspension, and all of the aesthetic accoutrements that you would expect. Now, my dad bought the car off the lot from Joe Curley Lincoln Ford Mercury, and he drove the car for, I think, about 11 years before he parked it. Now, this car at about 60,000 miles needed an oil pump, and by the time it hit 130,000 miles, the motor needed a rebuild. So fast forward to 1996, and I bought the car off of him for $450. I spent several $1,000s doing an engine rebuild, upgrading, putting tires and, suspension and just, rehabilitating the car. And that was my my pony car. That was my, Mustang, as it were. Unfortunately, I ran out of skill, and one day I crashed the car, and it was irreparably damaged. About 3 months after I crashed my Capri, I also crashed my motorcycle. And what did I do with the insurance money? I did the most sensible thing that a young kid can do. I bought another Mustang. Now, this car was a bone stock 89 Mustang GT 5.0, fuel injected. It didn't have anything but a set of wheels and the requisite set of Flowmasters and big tips on it. Now, my idea for the car when I bought it was to sort of build out a all-around, street racing car, as it were. It was the concept of a 1993 Cobra R meets the street. Now, in 1993, they only made 107 Cobra Rs, but fortunately for us enthusiasts, Ford produced all of the parts for the Cobra R and sold them through the Ford Racing catalog. And you could take any off-the-shelf Mustang and essentially turn it into a Cobra R, or even a Cobra R beater. Not a beater, a Cobra R beater. And that's what I did. So let me give you some details about my Mustang GT 5.0. So it has the Cobra R big brake kit, 13 inches in the front, 11.65 inches in the rear, 5-lug all the way around. It has 2001 bullet wheels all the way around. When I first built the car, it had a set of 1995 Cobra R wheels, but those really didn't fit very well, and I got tired of the rubbing, so I bought a set of bullet wheels, and these fit the chassis perfectly. And to be frank, they handled just as well. In the car, there is an auto power 6-point roll cage. I've got full Recaro SRD seats in there with 4-point harnesses. I have jacking rails, subframe connectors underneath it. The engine, I rebuilt the engine in 2001. It's a 302 30 over, so it's 306 cubic inches, 5 liters. It has a set of trick flow twisted wedge heads, 10.3 to 1 compression ratio, a Compkins XE 270 HR, and a trick flow street heat intake. That combination makes probably about 360 horsepower and 390 foot-pounds of torque. I did have it dynoed right after I assembled it, before the engine was tuned, and it did 271 horsepower and 321 foot-pounds at the wheels, but that was with a different camshaft and no tuning whatsoever. And since then, the cam, valve springs, and tune have completely changed. From suspension, as you can see, it has a Maximum Motorsports sticker on there, and that's because I have just about everything that Maximum Motorsports sold at the time for these cars. I have tubular front control arms, I have Bilstein shocks with coilovers in the front, I've got a strut tower brace, I've got every bushing is polyurethane, energy suspension, engine bushings, rack bushings. In the rear, it's got the Maximum Motorsports torque arm, it has aluminum lower control arms, it has Bilsteins with coilovers in the back, it has the Maximum aluminum panhard rod. It's got the Maximum rear race adjustable anti-sway bar. In the front, the 1993 Cobra R came with a 1.125" front sway bar, which is the same size sway bar they used on the 1984 Mercury Capri RS. The factory Mustang GT sway bar is an 1.5/16". So in order to make the front end stick a little better, I put the 84 Capri RS sway bar in it before I scrapped the car. And so essentially what you see here is, if you took a Mustang Cobra R from 1993 and turned it up to 11, that's what this GT is. Now, unfortunately, this car has been sitting since 2007. And I would be remiss if I said that that made me happy or that I was okay with that. It's just, unfortunately, life got in the way. I had a bad misfire with the car, and one night I took it to the movies and I started it up to go home, and it just would not run on all 8 cylinders unless you were at wide open throttle. It had a terrible miss, and the only way to clear the miss was to turn off the ignition and back on when you're going down the road. So clearly there was something not quite right with the ECU, and I got tired of fighting it, so I parked it in 2007, and at the time I had my house on the market and I thought that I was going to have a sale. And unfortunately the real estate market did what it did, and I spent 1.5 years chasing that dream and not working on my Mustang, and then other life stuff got in the way, and now finally I have a garage to work on whenever it's cold outside. So now I can work on my Mustang and not be cold and be dry and be, satisfied. I've got a concrete floor that's nice and smooth. I've never had that before. So this car, it needs a lot of attention. The first stage of the restoration is going to simply be getting it running again. I have a bunch of parts. I've got a starter, cap, rotor, plug wires, throttle position sensor. I've got a few things to put on the car because it's got the original 30-year-old starter in it still, and that's always been a problem. I've got, I've got a new rack and pinion for it, which it may or may not need, but might as well stick the new rack and pinion in it. I've got a few restoration parts for the exterior that I bought from 50 Resto back in 2003. In 2003 is pretty much when I finished most of the sort of cosmetic or aesthetic things on the car, and I considered it done from that standpoint. That's when I did the interior, the carpet kit. I put on a bunch of replacement parts, and unfortunately the elements have not been very kind, and I'm going to need to source some more of those parts, but not right now because what should I call it? The toy kitty is empty. So I'm working strictly off of what I've got in my coffers, my storage. Now the car doesn't run right now because the O-rings on the fuel pressure regulator are leaking. So I need to take the fuel pressure regulator off, put new O-rings in there, and put it back on. But I also need to drain all the foul fuel out of it and drop the tank and check that out to make sure that it's not a rust bucket inside, because it was a California car and it was living on E10 for a good portion of its life. So ethanol, garbage fuel had been going through it. But it will run after that. I've got, so to tune the ECU, I bought what they called an EEC tuner. And that was the first aftermarket Ford EEC4 tuning tool. I believe the one that came after that was called the Tweaker. And I've had the opportunity to use that one on another project, and that was pretty cool. It was a little expensive at the time. This one, they weren't cheap, but I think for the short term, what I plan on doing is I'm going to pull the ECU and I'm going to check all the capacitors with an ESR meter and probably recap the ECU since I expect that might be the source of most of the misfires. That's probably all the rebuilders do anyway when you go to AutoZone. So I'll recap that. I'll try to get it running again on all 8 cylinders. If it runs and idles fine, then I'll probably keep that ECU in it for the time being. But I also have a Mega Squirt that I built up for it in about 2004 that has one of the first Mega Squirt 2 daughter cards. They sent me a beta card back when they came out, just showed up in the mail. So I've got that setting aside, and then another Mega Squirt community member sent me EEC board, where basically you take a junk ECU, pull the connector off of it, and you solder it to this interface board that allows you to connect a Mega Squirt to a Ford EEC4 computer harness without having to do any modifications at all to the stock harness. So I've got that stuff, and so I just need to sit down and take a look at what's happened in the last, 12, 15 years since the Mega Squirt, since I built that Mega Squirt stuff, get the right firmware, and then the long-term plan has always been to put the Mega Squirt 2 ECU in there and retune the car using the Mega Squirt. So I have full control over all the parameters and make it run as good as I possibly can. So those are sort of the short to medium term goals for this project. If I can get a sponsor, and I'm talking to you, Late Model Restoration Supply, if I can get a sponsor for the cosmetic parts, that would make me happy, because it'd be nice to put a set of taillights on it. These side moldings are looking pretty junky. This one right here, I don't know what's going on with that one. It's kind of bulging out. But this door, you can see, is not the same color. This door, you can see, is not the same color as the rest of the car. And it has a different side molding, because this is from a 1991 car, from an LX, in fact. So the door side molding is different, the paint color is different. But the car is, it's okay. I mean, all the parts that were in it are still okay. It's got the Torsen T2R rear differential, so it's got the nice differential. It's got the T5Z transmission, which was making some funny noises, wide open throttle, 4th gear at the top end of 4th. So that might need a rebuild, because the countershaft in those things, they use a tapered roller bearing from the factory in the T5Z transmissions, which is the Cobra transmission, but they don't set the end play. And Paul Canalozzi, I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering his name right now, 5speeds.com, he's got a nice YouTube channel. He has a book, which I bought, that talks about rebuilding them. They're pretty straightforward, and he sells a nice parts kit, including a countershaft / 5-speed preload adjuster for these things. So I think that's probably what the issue is that I've got a bearing, because it only happened in 4th gear. So which means everything's locked out and it's just the countershaft that's, you know, spinning but not taking load. So anyway, yeah, so, you know, all the parts are good. You know, the engine has Mobil 1 in it, so it's been, I fired it up periodically every now and again, so it's not a dry engine. Mobil 1 is a great synthetic oil, and so far I haven't seen any reason to suggest that the motor needs to be taken down. I am going to do a compression check on it, but, you know, these are all things that I will do when the time comes, and you'll come along with me as I document this for my YouTube channel. So thanks for watching and sticking around for this intro, and look for the next episode where it'll be up on jack stands, and we'll start looking at some of the things that probably need to be attended to before it gets back on the road.